Good evening.
Everywhere I go on this island, it seems to me I find degeneracy.
Watch a few movies, take a few notes. See, it's a lot scarier when there's no motive, Sid.
We have a bargain.
Watch a few movies, take a few notes.
Do you feel the pain? Always fear. Pain, I can assure you, will be exquisite.
Watch a few movies, take a few notes.
His entire work consists of violence, all the time, obsessed with the issue of violence. Mayhem, gouging out of eyes, autopsies on the stage.
Come. It is time to keep your appointment.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome, years. Welcome, every returning friend. It is good to see you. We are here with a fresh dose of pedantry, institutional sniping, and a little bit of genre quibbling, because we are here for our third session of classic folk horror examination in Double Feature Horror Show, episode 177. And we've got something that's definitely a folk, and we've got something that's definitely a horror. So, you know, the fact that neither of them are folk horror in themselves shouldn't be too much of a problem, right, Murgoot? We'll get away with this one.
This was an interesting selection. So,
hey, man, look, you asked how the heck I came up with this, and it is all the BFI. I was thinking it's a very limited genre, the classic folk horror. Before we return to this and we go to the sort of 2010s explosion where everyone wants to have a go at it, where Americans do their own adaptations and sort of try and get into the vibe of folk horror, I figured there's got to be more classic ones I could look at, and the good old British Film Institute had my back, I thought. Well, it had my back. They were at my back the way it is at a Tory party conference. Let's put it that way. Their recommendations, well, how can I say? They don't exactly fit. As much as we liked them, they do not fit the vision of folk horror as we've come to understand it. But I think they've given us a little bit more of a clue in how we can locate films in the subgenre by giving us an example that isn't the thing, so we can sort of find the boundaries. That's my case anyway. I'm going to try and make that case for you. Before we go much further, hello Simon Roberts. Good to see you here this evening, and glad to see that you're enjoying the folk horror arc. It was fantastic having you on the show. I think it was a couple of weeks ago, wasn't it? And looking forward to having you back. I also see Lost Hearts has got a few fans in here. That one I can particularly understand. I think Penda's Fen is probably going to be the harder sell, but there is some really interesting stuff in there. Not just for horror fans, but for people who are maybe interested in what would the Guardian say. The more problematic aspects of folk horror, you know, the naughty stuff, the good stuff. But before we go any further, we're on YouTube, you know, all the usual shilling stuff. You're veterans, you know how it goes. Drop a like, don't feel dirty about it. We all have to do it. Drop that like, subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. Say hi if you tend not to. It's always good to see people in the chat. And also, if you want to go a little bit further than that, well, I'm sure you know how you can support the channel via Super Chats or ideally memberships here on YouTube and Subscribestar, and the links for those are all in the description. We also have a link to you, Murgoot.
at Murgoot at X.
That was very professional. We're just so concise. You know, some people say this series has a bit of a reputation for rambling tangents.
It's almost too much going on right now to post anything aside from some humor stuff that I find.
Mhm.
Like,
In busy political times, sometimes a little joke, sometimes a cute kitten. That's the way to go. Anyway, if all is well with you, Murgoot, shall we begin discussing tonight's fare?
which film first?
I feel Lost Hearts is the easy win.
Okay.
And fewer people would be familiar with Penda's Fen. So, you know what? I leave it up to you, Murgoot. Which one would you like to talk about first?
Oh, let's go with Lost Hearts because it's the easiest for me to describe.
All right. Look, good. Oh, are you stepping up and volunteering to give us a summary? Wait, no,
Lost
that means
Hearts,
I'm left
yes.
with pen. Oh, darn it. I walked into that one. Oh, dear. All right. Scuppered. I'll recover. It's fine. All right, Maggie. For anyone who hasn't seen it, and by the way, it's a full spoiler discussion, so hopefully, folks, you don't mind that. For anyone who hasn't seen Lost Hearts from 1973, what on earth happens in it? What's it about?
Okay. Lost Hearts is an M.R. James story put to film by the BBC for their what's the name of the series? Ghost Story for Christmas, although this one is a ghost story for Halloween. And it's a quaint little piece set in 19th century Britain. And it's young orphan boy, Stephen.
The first of our Stephens.
Yes. Stephen is being taken to a second cousin, an eccentric old gentleman's house to be raised and taken care of. And Stephen starts settling into life and as they're driving up, he sees two children in the field waving at him. He keeps seeing them along the way. And when he gets to the manse, he gets to know the cook and maid and the, I'd almost say butler, but not quite.
I thought like main servant?
Yes, servant,
probably?
yes.
Parks, you can call him.
Yeah. And he has various encounters with them. He gets invited into Mr. Abney's study several times for birthday cakes and that. But along the way, he keeps having dreams about these two ghostly children. At one point, they're playing a hurdy-gurdy and swaying along with it. And it freaks out the head servant and the head maid. And come to find out, Mr. Abney is following black magic, and he's preparing to sacrifice Stephen on Halloween. As the third victim, he'll brew a potion and become immortal. And the ghost children end up saving Stephen. And we'll leave it at that.
That'll do very nicely. Yes, it's a very simple story. Some would say unsubtle, with some quite impressive imagery, I think. Even though the copy you can probably find is it's kind of potato quality, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's something that as a kid I would have ended up watching on the old color 19-inch television and been completely satisfied with it.
Mm. Yes.
It's definitely late 60s, early 70s TV quality, but it's very well done.
Yes, you got the aspect ratio as your big giveaway. And yes, aspect ratio and very clear shot on video stuff. Very clear. It's one of those ones where you can really see that sort of shot on film, shot on video distinction that is a bit of a 70s giveaway, but yeah, good stuff in it. It's only 30 minutes or so, and given that it's based on a short story, we're not expecting too many twists and turns. There's a
Very
brief,
straightforward.
yeah, sort of alarmingly straightforward. You say, I don't want to be disparaging of it because it's not
alarmingly straightforward. It's more a quaint story. It's one you'd expect to tell to like a 10-year-old around Halloween.
Well, I mean, we should remember how they started off. This is an 1895 story. This is by M.R. James, who, if people don't know, was lecturing at, I'll be killed if I get this wrong, Cambridge. All right. If I've got that one wrong, calm yourselves down, lads. I know Oxford types get very sensitive about this. He was a Cambridge lecturer, and he also a vicar, and developed a sort of a habit of writing these ghost stories. And then he would, after formal dinner, bring people to his private study, dose them up with port, and then read them his creations, believing that sort of a cold...
I just took a look. He was at Cambridge, and then he was at Eton.
Nailed it. Okay. So these were short stories, short enough to be told, to be recounted to an audience that was savouring a nice port, literally in front of a fire on a cold night. Glorious. They are not designed to be complex sagas. They are designed to be evocative. However, actually, let's keep the praise going. In terms of being evocative, for a simple thing, there is some excellent imagery that the director, it's a Clark. We've got two Clarks involved here. Two Stephens, and both our protagonists are Stephen, and both our directors are Clarks. Lawrence Gordon Clark, chap who did most of the Ghost Stories for Christmas. Which, by the way, I'll say, folks, if you're at a bit of a loose end of an evening, get yourself on YouTube, look up Ghost Stories for Christmas from the 70s. You can find a lot of them. They are great fun. They go into the 80s, and they get a little bit more physical, more gory with stuff like the ash tree, but you'll have a good time with those. Very much recommended.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to watch more of these because this one was a lot of fun.
Yeah, really cozy. And within that simple remit, there's a lot of style. So I loved this imagery, which doesn't relate to the narrative at the time. It's built into an account being told by Abernathy, and
Abney,
sorry, did I get that wrong? What's his name?
It is...
Abney.
Abney.
Sorry, not Abernathy, right. Abney. Everyone knows I never remember anyone's name. It's terrible. I mean, I'm trying not to just say protagonist and antagonist now, but yes. So, you see, I'm being backed up here. Yes, Simon's right. The Whistle and I'll Come to You is amazing. Absolutely. Ash Tree, very good. Stalls at Barchester is also great. I think that's one of the very early ones as well. Very recommended. And I believe we're returning to the series next week, Simon. But anyway, guys, you'll binge this if you start it. Anyway, this
Daniel
imagery...
Hall. didn't read the Emerald Tablet to kids at bedtime. That's a bit obscure.
That's lost on me.
A magic grimoire? No. That's not something Americans really do, unless they're really eccentric.
Anyway, I liked how we got some editing that felt quite, quite inventive for the BBC at the time. So just sort of getting these images in there that weren't strictly part of the scene, but are just great imagery, like the kids in the fog, being able to play with the ghost being there or not. They did a nice job with it. And there was also this scene that I thought was wonderfully evocative. Oh, Everett, hello. Is this The Innocents? No, this is not The Innocents, although that is an absolutely wonderful film. That's 1961, I believe. No, I really want to cover it, and I think you can probably see a bit of an influence of The Innocents in how they're sort of, the ghosts are there in plain sight, but then just edited out briefly afterwards. But it's not as obvious as The Innocents in what it's getting at. There's potentially, let's lay some ground room. The Innocents has quite a lot of sexual subtext that is barely subtext, but is sort of limited in what it's able to say because of the time. But it's still, because of that, manages to be extremely disturbing. Just great stuff. This might have some actual sexual subtext, which maybe we can dig into a bit. But yeah, if you like The Innocents, I think you would like this. It's not as subtle as The Innocents, but it is very cozy and good taste. Yeah, so this imagery I thought was great. I think we had a little bit of unnerving uncanniness brought into our ghosts. They are not specters. They are not ethereal. They are sort of quite solid. And this motif of them crossing their hands in an almost sort of Egyptian burial style. I don't know about you, Murgoot. I was really getting Nosferatu vibes from this.
Nosferatu, or somebody brought up Salem's Lot, and I agree with that one too.
Ooh, how's the timing on that? Would Salem's Lot be just
Salem's
before
Lot
this?
is after, because this is, I believe
73.
Salem's Lot is 76 or 77. I could be wrong.
Maybe Tom Holland, not the delicious twink, the experienced director. Maybe Tom Holland saw this and took a little inspiration.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, folks. That's a long-running joke on this channel. The Tom Holland confusion. They build this up wonderfully and then show. Well, actually,
75 is when Salem's Lot came out in book form, and so it's 79 is when the miniseries came out.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'm going to suspect the influence goes the other way around then. Oh, hang on. Have I got that wrong? Sorry, Lazarus. Did I? Apologies if I've got that wrong. I got it in my head. It was Tom Holland who did that series. I know he did the Langoliers. Apologies if it was Tobe Hooper. I'll be corrected on that. Thank you if I got that wrong. Yeah, so the setup for the reveal here is quite nice. M.R. James will give you a little bit of build-up, but he is often setting you up for a bit of a memorable scare, as is classic. This one, apologies if you're eating, folks. You only see this very briefly on screen, but I'm going to be quite mean. I've screen capped it so we can enjoy it. They actually build in something really quite nice when they build on that sort of arms crossed Nosferatu uncanny movement, that they're hiding this rather nice effect on the chest.
Their hearts are removed, and as Mr. Abney says, it's take the heart out of their chest, put it in the brazier, cook it down and add it to a fine port and add whatever he needs to, and then drink it down. And with a third child at their 12th year, he becomes functionally immortal. Which, yeah, it's just things slipped into it. The dark magic, the alchemy, the symbology, and the study. It's definitely leading up to something.
Very hiding in plain sight. And I loved the decision to have the children just kind of constantly present. Like these weren't rare fleeting glances. Like they really got to occupy the scene and just take up loads of space. Like it just, I guess what I'm saying is typically you are following the protagonist and you get the brief shot of the ghost. This time, like, there is no attempt to hide it. The ghosts are front and center, and we're following them to the protagonist.
Yeah. Well, when Stephen's in bed and the ghosts of the children wake him up, and the foreign boy picks up
Giovanni.
the hurdy-gurdy. Giovanni starts playing the hurdy-gurdy, and they start dancing along with it. That was... It's hard to describe. It was humorous and kind of ghastly all at the same time.
Yes, the implication of hypnosis that they needed to set up was kind of handy. Also, you know, the whole thing is Stephen's going to lose his will one way or another, right? It's either going to be his second cousin drugging him, or it's going to be these guys hypnotizing him. I'll confirm, Everett, you can find this on YouTube. There's a version that just says it's got Italian subs. You can just turn those off. So if you search Lost Hearts 1973, you'll find a few copies of it. You are looking for one about 34 minutes long. And then you've got the full one. But you can find it elsewhere. So YouTube's got copies. I'm seeing that Shudder has it. I think Amazon Prime might have it, so you should be able to find it quite nicely. So this style of horror of bringing out the hurdy-gurdy just sort of made it quite nice and quaint. Before that does sort of lead you into a sort of false sense of security, where it's still sort of weird and wrong before they hit you with the gore.
Well, I like the fact that Mr. Abney, after he gets Stephen back in, gets the manservant to get him back to bed, he finds the hurdy-gurdy and burns it.
Yes. Well, you've got... I mean, he was never exactly a normal character, to be honest, but I think the film let you have a little bit of a suspicion that Parks was the wrong one. Front and center is a question of what happened to the children. There is very little fat on this story. And the sort of closest bit of misleading you get is when the ghost children claw the wall and Stephen is blamed, and then it's you're wondering if Parks has gotten rid of the kids, or because the second cousin is sort of bizarrely okay with it.
Yeah, the other part is when Parks goes down for the port and hears the children down there, and it must be rats. It must be. He talks to the maid, and I heard voices. Well, it must be rats. And then Stephen walks in, and yes, it was rats. They're trying to explain everything away for Stephen. They know something's going on, but they're not quite sure. What is going on.
They kind of shut it down for him, which is interesting. That felt the closest to classic ghost story stuff. where they're all spread, that experience of trying to convince people. And very interesting, Mr. Abney, never bothered by it, hits them with the old, there are more things in heaven and earth quotation. He doesn't complete it, but I think the BBC is trusting its audience to get the reference, which is a bit lovely, really.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask you, Murgoot, do you think we would lose the younger audience with a ghost playing a hurdy-gurdy who looks, very corporeal? He's a kid painted blue. Like, let's be honest. Do you think we would lose a younger audience with that?
Maybe. If you did it, modernized it such that it was in Goosebumps style, which I could see, it would hold their attention. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Maybe someone can try playing that over the scene, see if it wrecks it. No. I mean, I loved it. I'm sort of self-consciously concerned, like, that if I've never really had a problem with it, so I think I'm possibly over worrying, but I tend to find, like, I worry that if I show younger people, Zoomers particularly, this kind of stuff, that it'll come off as a bit cheesy.
It could, but if you get them into it's a quaint tale. If you can get them interested, 5 minutes in, it picks up a lot. And if you can get past them thinking it's outdated and cheesy and get them into the actual dialogue, then they can follow along.
Yeah. And do you think there's I was wondering, do you think there's anything going on beyond the surface? Under the surface here. And we've had that up for a while, so just while we discuss if there was anything else going on in this BBC production, I'll just get this image here of just for a bit of variety.
There's definitely hints that Mr. Abney is wrong, and that's showing it. But he also talked about he has to be 12 on his birthday, and it's Halloween, and it's the witching hour. And it's wrong in the fact that he needs to take a pure life at the peak of youth and have his heart poured into a glass of port and drink it down. It's the subtext is there, but you know for a fact that Stephen has to be pure and at the peak of youth. But Mr. Abney spells it out for you right off right before what the point of the whole thing is. So it's not.
Dr. Prepper is on the money. If anyone is fairly new to the channel, we'll just say, like, because of YouTube censorship, we've developed some rather unusual in languages, and Haribo, I'm trying to infer from context, but Haribo is our little bit of a shorthand that we can say on YouTube for this sort of stuff. I didn't, if it is hinting at, say, let's just say the robbing children of their innocence, it's roundabout it. So there's obviously, like, the removing of the innocence. Okay, the removing of the heart isn't exactly something I would associate with that subtext, but I found it very notable that we saw that Phoebe was given a bath. Also, I'm just gonna have to remind myself, I believe Phoebe possibly has some has a meaning. I'm trying to remember. I think, is that the one that means Oh, come on. I'm just looking. I think I'm wrong. No, okay. I'm not far off, yes. Implications of bright, shining, and pure. I've got it confused with another one, but that will work for our symbology. So choosing a pure victim with the name Phoebe. Yes. We got that. We saw her in the bath. Very notably, I thought that what we saw was her giving a handkerchief to him. Was kind of like a lady granting her favor. I don't know if you think I'm reaching with that.
No, she's the innocence of the child helping out the elder gentleman. But the subtext for Greek patronage was there. But
Greek patronage, is that going to be our code word now?
That's the one I could think of. That subtext was there, and then you realize it's even darker than that. He's trying to take his heart, take his innocence, take his youth. So,
yes. Yeah, quite like, so that's possibly in there. I mean, dealt with considerably better and more powerfully, more directly by the Innocents, where it's just the text of the story, frankly. And we really have to cover that one day. We really do. But I think it's potentially in there. For the wrapping up, where we get some absolutely fantastic imagery, this was a section that really reminded me of Hammer. You know, the form, your the person sort of stands still in horror as the thing approaches them. That was very Hammer horror. But the sort of move to the silhouetted thing, I thought was a really beautiful artistic change.
That was wonderfully shot. Mr. Abney attempting to stab Stephen and the ghost children, grabbing the knife and rescuing Stephen, in effect. And then the final touch of the graveyard eulogy from the vicar. As I was saying behind the scenes, I'm surprised that they didn't bury him outside of the churchyard, because the vicar goes on about how wrong and how devilish Mr. Abney was, delving into the occult. So, thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I wondered if the implication was that basically that he still had the money and influence, which is kind of how he got away with it. But they let him stay in the churchyard, but with because of the influence. But then, yeah, still condemning him in a very subtle way. But no. This is where we maybe run into interesting ground here, Murgoot. And that's a question of whether this is actually folk horror, as we've described it, whether we are wrong.
This is not so much, I wouldn't call it, it edges up to the line, but doesn't quite cross over into folk horror. This is more traditional English fare of the wealthy, eccentric gentry getting involved in the occult. This is more standard ghost story, with classism mixed in rather than folk horror.
Mm. That is a very good catch. The classism angle is in there. I know we sound a bit Guardian here, folks, but you'll catch that in this and Penda's Fen. So obviously, this is an adaptation of an 1895 short story. But the fact that it was picked up in the 1970s means it has some relevance to the 1970s. There was a reason they looked at this and thought, yeah, we can do something with that. So we shouldn't write that off and say nothing had, the time of its adaptation had nothing to do with it. Look, I think maybe what's going to be helpful is if we bring in our checklist from before that we sort of built up when we're trying to get a hang on what folk horror is. Because I think the BFI, heaven forfend I disagree with them and the great work they do, but I think they're a little off in this one. Folk horror isn't just spooky stuff when there's cows around. It's more subtle, Certainly there's a documentary on Amazon at the moment that is quite far off the mark. Maybe we should actually have a little talk about it next week, because it seems to miss a lot of the underlying motivation for folk horror. Certainly stuff that is very broadcast in Penda's Fen when we get to that. But for anyone who hasn't heard it before, our little checklist for what makes something folk horror is the prominence of nature in the imagery. Obviously, that's got to be there. But there is reaction to modernity. So typically the person you are with is a modern character, a metropolitan character who is going into the countryside, meeting the old world, and their values, their lifestyle is being threatened by it. In the case of Blood on Satan's Claw, which we covered first, that is your city judge visiting a shire that has become infected by evil, and he has to go to the old school methods of literally bringing out a Zweihander to cut evil down. In the case of the Wicker Man, it is Sergeant Howie going from civilization to the rural community. The Witches, we've got the same thing. It's experienced world-traveling teacher going to the quiet village of Hedeby. And I think I've done all our classic examples there. Oh, Witchfinder General. Okay, I'll grant you, Witchfinder General's a bit of an exception there, because there's no one really coming in from civilization, and except, well, the Witchfinder himself is kind of corrupt. So Witchfinder General bucks our trend, but Witchfinder General, it's also one of the earliest ones. It's 1968. So that's like the Witches. It's while the genre is still forming. That is my cope, and I am sticking with it.
Yeah, this one has the rural setting, but it doesn't have the rural city divide.
It doesn't have Christianity under threat. That's another consistent element. Christianity is not really threatened at any point. I mean, you've got someone who is non-Christian being an evil practitioner, but your protagonist isn't really explicitly Christian. So his values aren't there. And in watching this, I think I worked out, and forgive me, Murgoot, because we said this in DMs, but let's pretend we didn't prep this at all before. I kind of worked out that one of the other characteristics of folk horror is, in contrast to normal horror, it's communal, it's mass, whereas normal horror is singular. It's Michael Myers, a lone psycho. It's Norman Bates as a spoilers, by the way, guys. It's usually the lone psycho or the lone monster or a particular cursed thing that can send people off. what tends to happen in folk horror is that it's usually whole communities have gone wrong. It's sort of which fits the other thing that really I have to give you credit for, because you phrased this perfectly. Folk horror is really like cosmic horror. It's a world. Folk horror is where evil is the norm, darkness is the norm, and usually it's your poor protagonist being the representative light, going in there, fighting really hard to keep the darkness at bay, but the darkness is just sort of natural.
Daniel Hall brings up a good point. Yes, this is more Gothic. I fully agree. Arthur Machen does folk horror really, really well.
Ooh,
His stuff is brilliant.
Familiar to me.
Read some of Arthur Machen's stories. They're excellent. I believe Waifu would really enjoy them.
I am good. Oh, Welsh. Hello.
The American equivalent, who came far later, 40s and 50s, for the American side, mainly Appalachian folk horror and just folk tales in general, would be Manly Wade Wellman. He has some good ghost stories. He has a lot of Appalachian fantasy stories too, and he's very well written.
Excellent recommendations. Well, I've got Arthur Machen up in a tab, so that will be extra reading for me. And I'm just recapping our checklist. So we've got prominence of nature, we've got reaction to modernity, conflict with Christianity. We almost always have mass. Did I say communal? If I did, apologies. We have typically a strong sexual element. Like that is almost always, it's like the idea of the natural lust, the atavism breaking out. Atavism, return to primal bestial forms. If you, the word comes up a lot in Dracula, which is why I know it. And very frequently, there's a big focus on like corruption of the children. So those are our hallmarks for folk horror. So this has children under threat, but we've got kind of a singular villain here. It's one guy who's gone wrong, and he's, quickly corrected by nature, which seems very anti-folk horror to me.
Yeah, he was right. This is far more Gothic horror.
Yeah. So big agree. Basically, Daniel, big agree. As the kids say, it's like Gothic. Weird, strange, yeah. So yeah, little weird, yeah, in the sort of early sort of Poe Lovecraft sense, yeah, without obviously being too cosmic. Yeah, I can definitely see that. The interest in the occult definitely is a bit more weird tale, as it was. So yes, this is around folk horror, but doesn't have that key ethos. None of this is challenging the mood at the time. None of this is troubling to basically the metropolitan worldview, which most folk horror is. That it's horror that basically comes out of an urban creative class worried about what is happening around them and being transposed into the countryside, which is why these sort of come around in a time of great turmoil, the 70s. And before we go much further, thank you very much, No Need to Know, sending in £5. Very much appreciated. I'm going to take my time on this one because I love that you mentioned rental breakdown. Yes. So very much enjoyed your magnum opus rental breakdown, which I spent an afternoon watching last week. Thank you very much. If people don't know that, that was my rather exhaustive, high effort, and peculiar way of exploring what happened to Blockbuster, which you will often be told is Netflix's fault. And I spend about 2 hours and 40 minutes over 7 episodes showing you why it is not Netflix's fault and filling it with my own weird style. So thank you very much. That was an absolute labor of love, and always chuffed when people enjoy it. So I'll recommend it for anyone else who hasn't seen it. Do look at Rental Breakdown. There is a link to that in the description of this video. You can find the playlist. Thank you very much, No Need to Know. Also saying, I love the streams too. Keep up the good work. Thank you. That is really appreciated. It's a lovely comment.
GRBL, so it cannot be done without Christianity in the Western backdrop. No, it can be. Korean cinema does it frequently. Thai cinema has several examples. You'll have to look them up, where the city-dwelling cop or city-dwelling couple come down and experience the horrors of, the rural folk tales come to life. It's not just Christianity. It's several cultures do it. Korean and Thai are the big two that I know of.
Do you think, how can I say? I'm tempted to say that those are all sort of reactions, though. They're sort of second level imitators, you know, in the way like I'm sorry, everyone knows this example, but in the way that sort of American slashers are sort of looking at Italian giallo and saying, yes, we can do that. But it's a very distinct, different product. Mm-hmm. And I sort of feel like folk horror from other countries is going to, I doubt it would have the same vibe. I'd be interested, but
it doesn't have the same vibe as English or European folk horror. Mm-hmm. It's all its own vibe. And it's very interesting just because you almost have to look up their folk tales to know why it's so horrifying.
Okay.
And it is their own spin on it, but they're done very well.
So perhaps we can sort of take out Christianity and say that as long as it is something that sort of unsettles the mainstream moral underpinning, the moral axioms of the culture, then it would work.
Yes.
I could probably go with that. I struggle to think of that because I just think of folk horror as being so English and tied up with that stuff, but then I would notice the English references and I wouldn't know it from another culture as well.
Yeah, it's American folk horror tends to be fairly different from European folk horror, but it's there. You want a mainstream one, look at the Appalachian horror of Pumpkinhead, which the city folk crossed the wrong person. They used that and bring about the demon of vengeance from the back holler.
Did we decide on whether Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a little bit folk horror?
I mean, it's almost there. And I mean, you could almost say the original Hills Have Eyes, even though it's inbred mutants. You could almost say that's American folk horror, but not quite. It's hard to tell. Different cultures' takes on things.
they both do a pretty good job of challenging the mainstream. I'd say Texas Chainsaw goes quite a bit further in that, in not really providing a solution and putting a lot of the blame for the situation of the Sawyer clan on the mainstream.
Yeah.
I'm going to be careful here, because otherwise I'm just going to start up. It is not the standard source, but I could read a fair bit to you. The research material, as you will not be surprised, is quite heavy on Texas Chainsaw. There's I could read you 3 or 4 paragraphs on the use of gasoline in that film, but I will spare you that, guys.
The symbology of gasoline.
Yes. You guys are wonderful enough and tolerant, so I won't inflict that on you. I was fascinated, but anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll give my description, my score here. This was a quaint, Daniel put it, Gothic. It has the feel of almost folk horror until it comes full circle and becomes pure Gothic. It's trying to take the innocence from someone else by force. It's well shot. It's nice and creepy. It's suitable for kids, I'd say, 10 and up.
Yeah.
And it's a delightful, quaint little piece. I give it 9 burgers, a little bit of ketchup, and I'll go from there. How do you feel about it?
I think you have to really bear in mind what it is. And for being an adaptation of a short story, I think it's very good. Not complex, but not rote. It has those nice, weird elements. It's much more artistic than you'd expect. You know, the effort that they went to showing the dredging of the lake, looking for Phoebe, those sort of inserts. I'm going to get that fog shot up just because I love it so much. Where is it? I love this. This looks so great. You know, stuff like this is high effort, so it raises the score for me. Solid adaptation. It's not meant to be super subtle. It's a short story. It's got to land quickly and hit you as something a bit memorable, which I think it does in a couple of scenes. Yeah. So I think 9 sounds good. I'd happily pop that on a Halloween. It could fit into the schedule. Doesn't waste your time. It's cozy. So yeah, that's a winner for me. We will move on now to the.
I wanted to make a comment.
Oh, please do.
Dr. Prepper. Yeah, Lovecraft's horror at Red Hook. Could almost be seen as reverse folk horror, where the degenerate are coming out of the city, and their celebrations are bringing back the old traditions, much like Lovecraft's The Rats in the Walls is a throwback to Gothic horror with some of the folk horror thrown in, but mainly Gothic horror. So, yeah.
What would you... reverse folk horror is an interesting one. I'd be tempted to say it's kind of folk horror that is more honest because it doesn't do the transposition of urban anxiety to the safer side of the countryside. You know, like that's my take on this. Like, we always have to remember who makes this, who writes this. They are, you know, like this is someone at the BBC, you know. Their concerns are going to be the concerns of someone working in power, working in a major institution, probably in London. The idea of people being so uncouth as to reject their value system entirely, like that's a source of horror. But in seeing sort of unrest and disruption, they're going to be seeing that around them. But and just crime stats alone will show you that the countryside is not where everything is getting dangerous. So they are, when they're doing this transposition, they move that violence and the breakdown of society out of the city where they're actually seeing it into the countryside. So it's that transposition, I think, is quite key. Lovecraft doesn't do it. He looks directly at the urban setting and just describes that in horrific terms. And he's kind of getting at something that I'm fascinated by, but I haven't got my thoughts together on, which is about the urban horror. Like, I think there should be more horror in cities, but the genre seems to really struggle. Like, we've got very little of it. I was chatting with Simon Roberts about this, and bless him, probably boring him to tears, but because I felt I was going on about it too long, but I was scrabbling for examples where they managed to actually do it and not sort of, Jason Takes Manhattan style, tell you it's in the city, but actually shove it into a sewer, you know, or a boat.
Well, yeah, the best examples of American urban stuff are kind of cheesy, but they work rather well. Chud, Cannibalistic Humanoid Underground Dwellers, holds up fairly well. Alligator holds up okay. It's cheesy as hell, but it holds up. And then The Relic holds up pretty well.
Interesting suggestion of Drillicilar. I feel like Drillicilar and Maniac, they have a kind of problem because they have to sort of focus on the isolation of the city angle, which works well for horror. Like, if you can get people into alleyways, it's the fear of all these spaces you can't see, you don't understand, where you're vulnerable. But I think they struggle to that's sort of the easiest aspect of horror to get. So American Psycho traded on that.
Midnight Meat Train.
Yeah, I end up the proper urban horror, and forgive me, like when I say proper urban horror, I am of course being very biased and just meaning the kind I want to see. I'm only coming up with, yes, well done, Mostly Dead, Candyman. You knew I was going to say it. You know me too well. Seven, Midnight Meat Train, yeah. Jacob's Ladder.
Shyamalan's Devil.
Ooh. I mean, it.
Well, the elevator in the high rise, and the claustrophobia, fear of elevators, fear of the worst people imaginable.
That, in that case, that would work. I'll try not to. I should probably pull us back because I really want us to do an urban horror series, or at least a prolonged discussion on it, and why horror struggles to actually be in the city in like high density. I'll pull us away from this because we've got a whole other film to cover. I was also really surprised that this was an actual film. This is a full film, like 90 minutes, or well, close to 100 minutes.
I will be right back.
Absolutely.
Go ahead and
right.
start without me.
Okay, while we wait for you to be back, I will tell you folks about the wonderful world of Penda's Fen. And the title is absolutely... Simon is baiting me. I'm not going to do it, Simon. I'm not going to go back into it. But I think there are aspects of the urban experience that horror should be talking about, and isolation is some, the existence of dark spots and like unsafe places in what is meant to be an environment is good, but the idea of overcrowding and like breakdown of society, like breakdown of standards, the kind of things you can see in a city that sort of challenge your expectations, that's the stuff I would like it to touch. But I will not be dragged back into it. Shame on you, shame on you. I'm going to tell people about Penda's Fen. Penda's Fen from 1974. We got to get this right. Okay. Right. This is probably the one most of you won't have seen. I hadn't seen it. I hadn't heard of it. And I felt a little misled in thinking that this was a horror. This was from 1974's Play for Today, written by a chap whose name I'm going to have to look up because I never remember any names, David Rudkin. And David Rudkin seems to have done this as a little bit of an autobio. This is very from the heart, because just looking up his biography, he has got a lot in common with Stephen, our protagonist. Yes, a second Stephen. Second Clark directing and a second Stephen protagonist. What are the odds? Rudkin, like Stephen, grew up in a quaint little village. He was in a very formal school where he was involved with the, was it the junior corps? Or is it? I've got some details. Yeah, Corps of Signals. There we go. No, so he had involvement in sort of what we would call army cadets, so a youth military movement that David was. He also studied the same thing, so you get the feeling that David and Stephen, there's a lot of crossover there. The director was rather confused about what he was working with from Rudkin's play, and a lot of the language here is more consciously theatrical, less natural. It hasn't been adapted that much, but there are elements that I think were done to try and make this a bit more of a saleable, accessible project. For instance, some that I haven't shown you the title screen for it, because I wanted you to see this hand. This hand showing up early, I think, is an attempt to try and ground Penda's Fen in horror, to let you know you are seeing a horror film, guys, I assure you. But it will not exactly feel like that. This will be something that's incredibly folk, but not all that horrific. But it has a scene where a young man from a group of characters that I believe we basically don't know well and never see again wander off into a dark field, and one of them sustains a mysterious and horrific series of burns and comes away, if I can find my link, there we go, coming away horrifically burned. Why am I spending so much time on this? Because this is extremely like Hammer Horror's 1958, 1957 Quatermass, the Quatermass experiment. So that is your rural setting, someone hit by something that means their body gets taken over on one side. So very, very much a Quatermass thing. This is, I think, to try and help ground Penda's Fen in something that is easier to understand, so people kind of know what they're getting at. Because aside from this and a couple of other moments, Penda's Fen is not all that horrific, but it is filled with a kind of constant dread generated by our protagonist, who is very smart but very isolated and feels things are very, very wrong, and is starting to doubt all the institutions around him and vent his anger towards them as he sort of searches for something that's more stabilizing to him. He's in a period of sort of internal chaos and disruption, and he's trying to find some stability as he doubts everything around him.
Well,
Does that sound fair, Murgoot?
it's a coming of age story where he goes from very moralistic and insufferable with it to questioning everything and everything from what he knows, especially what he knows about his parents in more ways than one. His father is a vicar who is, well, we can get in on that, but his beliefs are heterodox. And figuring out that the conspiracy theorist is somewhat right. He goes from going whole hog into the cadets to becoming effectively a conscientious objector and getting, well, loss of status in the school with his teachers and with the students. It's coming of age story and finding out nothing is the way you thought the real world was.
Yes. Yeah, this is a chap who is really sort of, his whole worldview is coming apart. Just like you said, he's so certain, and it just all unravels, and he finds a sort of connection to something much more solid. And from that, we get some very interesting imagery and also a message that I just don't feel the BBC would really go for these days. Inbred duck. It's still one of my favorite avatars. Thank you for sending £5. Very much appreciated. Saying loving your land is a spiritual thing. The protagonist wants a deeper connection. There is a mystery and a magic to the land that we have forgotten. Yes. And for the second time in 2 weeks, we're going to go back to pagan kings. We'll be back on there next week, but this really gets to it. Yes. Let's talk about how it covers that. But maybe very quickly, shall we do our checklist for folk horror? We can do this very quickly, right? Do we prominently feature nature throughout the film?
Yes.
Yep, no doubt whatsoever. Endless footage. Is there a challenge with challenging of modernity?
Yes.
Yep. I mean, got to remember it's for us. This is now 51 years ago. 51 years.
52.
Oh my gosh, really? Oh wait, was this a 73? Apologies. 52 years ago. And we've got a guy who is uncharacteristically given a chance to, the journalist. Yes, I am going to stand up for a journo here. Don't die of shock, folks. A journo who is going to sort of really challenge the worldview of the time, but not say we need to pull it forwards. He's not calling them all backwards. He's not exactly saying he's not saying we need to go back. He's not saying we have to rev turn, but he's definitely challenging modernity. Do we have a conflict with Christianity?
Definitely. Definitely.
Excellent. Do we have concern about the youth rebelling?
Yes.
Yep. Told from the youth's point of view. Do we have chaos and darkness as a sort of is there a sort of worry about sexuality, a strong sexual aspect to the horror?
Yes.
Yes, there is. Ooh-wee. If anyone is only listening and not watching, that is your choice.
How that got broadcast, I have no clue, especially as censorious as Britain was at this point. Although,
yes, there's a dream sequence following on from this that really is begging for a burning bush joke to tie into the conflict with Christianity, but I am far too classy to make that. Some people have even said there's a little bit of sexual imagery going on here.
yeah, the incubus, succubus, the night hag symbology, the demon sitting on, straddling him while he's trying to sleep.
Yes, upstanding, changing from angel to devil.
Mhm.
So we've got that there, and I think we also have the idea of the threat is all around. Civilization is trying to go into a hostile environment. It's that's maybe the harder one to check off. Do you reckon?
Yeah.
We it's there, but it's not exactly like the dark forest surrounding everything and the harsh environment killing the plants like we have in the Vitch. Like the Vitch is just like your best harsh environment situation for folk horror.
Yeah.
This is a bit more obscure, like just the weather makes it so people have to seek shelter all the time. There are sort of ghosts all around. There's someone wandering in a field is sort of struck down. There are people. I don't know. It's
finding the ghost of Sir Edward Elgar
Yeah.
in the abandoned. I don't know if it was a well house or if it was an abandoned barn, but yeah. And I have to point out that Elgar's music is very prominent, especially one piece, which is I'm brain farting.
That's okay. You're gonna have to
Elgar's
pronounce it
Dream
now.
of Gerontis throughout.
You're directed very strongly to it. It is named. It is explained for you. Just like with the numerous references to Manichaeism, you are not meant to miss it. It's explained for you so you can understand it. Just like this, how can I say, Penda's Fen in some ways is obscure, and it's got some very clever ideas, but I love that it doesn't alienate you. It tells you where to look so that you can look, so you're not sitting there being like, oh, hang on, what the heck's Manichaeism? You know? They spell it out for you so you can understand what they're getting at quite easily.
When Stephen finds out his father, the vicar, is basically a Manichaean, a dualist rather than one god and a lesser opponent. That kind of blows his mind. Then finding out he's adopted blows his mind yet again.
So in a way that leads us into being able to say that he is we do have the sort of surrounded by threat element, but in a very unusual mode. In Penda's Fen, the majority culture is still there. It's actually present. That is the majority culture. It's not, and someone is going in and doubting that. You know, it's not like he's a Christian going into a place full of pagans. He's seeing actually the culture all around him is something that has gone a bit rotten.
Yeah, well, it's is this really a horror? And then Mr. Vicar and Mrs. Franklin are in bed discussing, well, did we do what was suggested, or did we do what we know what was right by not telling him until his 18th birthday? It's okay. Are they going to tell him that they're actually pagans and there's going to be a big ceremony? It was kind of a curveball. And then you just find out that the big secret is Stephen's actually adopted. That was a red herring that kind of threw me off. Is this horror? Is this not? To be blunt, I don't consider this horror. I just consider it a coming of age story where the boy is really troubled.
Yeah, it had a lot of echoes of other things for me, and it felt like they wanted to try and help you see it as a horror so that you could sell it, but the horror elements, the more explicit ones, don't feel like they fit in. Like this, this dream sequence isn't really in. You get a lot of play on the scene of, shall I get you your nice thick booty demon here? We'll get you your thick booty demon there. Like this gets a lot of play if you look at the film, and you're like, oh wow, it must focus on this weird devil creature that's been summoned. Nope. No. And it's not really a devil. It's like very obviously just about Manichaeism. He first sees an angel who, is a
beautiful man with a woman's voice,
which you are primed for from his discussion of Blumenach, what's it called? The Dream of Gerontius, right? Like he explicitly tells you he thinks that is there, that it's a woman's role. It's a man's role sung by a woman, I think he says. And then he brings that confusion into his idea of an angel. And then because of the Manichaean angle, he's just switching them around, right? So that's what it's for. It's not some demon imp creature curse thing like you might expect if you just do a Google image search for this film.
Yeah.
I mean, this demon is the front cover of the DVD, which is slightly misleading.
Well, Stephen talking to his instructor about dreams and how he had a dream about a demon on the steeple and using his will to force it to become an angel and then turning it back into a demon. It all flows from the music, but he's troubled in his dreams by all of it from there on out.
I think the way he described it, I felt, was very related to him basically coming unstuck from what he thought was moral certainty, and then really sort of not doubting Christianity, but doubting the institutions, which, not too heretical, frankly, it definitely not heretical to suggest that institutions can be taken over and subverted. It's sort of one of the major problems that Jesus had. And it's interesting. Like this film does a rather good job of getting along that line. And also to complete the thought of what else is going on here, as well as the Manichaean ideas, it's also Stephen's sexual confusion.
Oh yeah.
Like, this was not exactly subtle.
It's his heart races when he sees the rude milkman or milk boy. His dream is the touching and grasping when the milkman he almost runs into the milkman's truck on the bicycle, and he gets woken up and picked up by him, and he's kind of in a fugue state, just staring at him lovingly. It's...
And the milkman definitely had his number at that point.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then Stephen goes and visits the journalist's wife while she's in the gardens. Well, can homosexuals have children? Okay. I want children.
I mean, I quite liked when he was just going around accusing journalists of being unnatural.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was quite fun. I mean, obviously, it's a bit more pointed than that by accusing. The second meaning is that the journalist is really going against what is happening at the current mores,
Mm-hmm.
as well as the main intended meaning of accusing the journalist of being homosexual. But yeah, this is maybe a slightly tiresome line, if we're honest, about the idea that if you have doubts about sexual liberalism, then you are secretly a big gayer yourself.
Well,
a little bit of a cliche for
1974, and for the BBC to be this blatant about it is quite surprising.
Yeah, I mean, it's done interestingly. I kind of like the fact that this lad who he fantasizes about isn't nice to Stephen, doesn't look like he's enjoying it, like he remains entirely stony-faced throughout the scene, which I think is Stephen at this point isn't able to view it as a good thing, that it's not something of oh, I can win the jock over. It's no fantasy like that. It's Stephen is very caged in. He's also
revolted by himself at this point.
Totally. Where he's doing this, by the way, this is cut off from the frame, but we see this upward shot several times, and to the left and right of the jock's head is some classical scripture. The one to his left is Fiat Lux, let there be light, so be enlightened, etc., see clearly. And the other is, I believe, be true to yourself in Greek. Am I right? Am I misremembering?
I believe so.
It's basically coded things for, bro, you are gay.
Mm-hmm.
This is your dream telling you dropped your gay card. But they did it in Latin and Greek, so I quite like it. But that's an element that I think would be done quite obnoxiously on the BBC. Here it's quite, I get it. I also like that his parents thought it was a complete cliche that he fancied the milkman. So we are ticking off the hallmarks of folk horror here. We're maybe slightly doubting how horrific the story actually is. Maybe even wondering if some elements were thrown in to help make it look like a horror, like this dream sequence. I got it up earlier.
Where he comes into the hedgerow, into the hedge maze, and all the children and mothers are sitting around in yellow, and they're gleefully going up and having their hands chopped off, which is really odd imagery. Just bizarre.
Yeah, we should maybe ask a little bit about what's going on and why he's viewing that. But before we went live, I was talking about this and just saying this film reminds me of other stuff. So obviously we mentioned Quatermass with the quite isolated scenes that could almost have been written specifically for TV. This section here, though, I got quite a Kubrick lens. I saw up in the comments, I think Simon said this reminded him of The Wicker Man. I mean, this would be very contemporaneous with The Wicker Man, so I don't think they'd have a chance to influence each other. I got Kubrick vibes from this. Specifically, I got kind of Clockwork Orange vibes. And that's mostly because of, the similarities to Alex, the protagonist of Clockwork Orange. Isolated school kid, active imagination, fascination with a composer, etc. Obviously, it goes in a different direction, but I thought this kind of shot here, it felt very, very Stanley Kubrick.
And thank you, Adam Loves Horror. Proper will appreciate that.
I do indeed. Thank you very much. Okay. Apparently, YouTube is being a pain. It's been known to happen, guys. So thank you for sending a $10 tip on Subscribestar. Very much appreciated that ingenuity, that perseverance. No, I do appreciate that, and I'm glad you're enjoying the stream. Thank you. Let's see. Yes, Simon saying similar to the Garden New Maidens. Absolutely. It's the kind of, I want to say, the depth of field and the focus here, and just the lack of explanation is making me think of Kubrick, particularly Clockwork Orange, because that is where he threw so much of the dream imagery that he had experimented with in 2001, but otherwise, is a bit sparing about. But this, I really thought of that. And Clockwork Orange was 1973, so probably could not have seen it and been influenced by it, unfortunately. But maybe there's something in the water there. What is the symbology of this? What does it all mean? We've described why he saw a thick booty succubus. If anyone had, I'm sure someone typed thickubus, and if they did, I don't blame them. But what exactly is going on in this one? This is maybe a bit more opaque to understand.
Yeah, I'm puzzled by it. Let's just say that. Aside from, which will be explained later in the film, seeing his actual parents, his imagined actual parents.
I'm going to have to apologize here. Dr. Prepper, thank you very much. This is very embarrassing. Yes, Clockwork Orange is 71. How the heck did I get that wrong? Yeah. Oh dear. It's not like I've done a 5-part series on the entire life of Kubrick, is it? Div. Yes, sorry, it's 72. Do you know what? I'm mixing it up with The Exorcist, which is 73. I won't go into the details of why I mixed that up. But yes, 71. So it could indeed be an influence. Yes. Excellent. Good. I feel saved there. Thank you, Dr. Prepper. Saved, but also like an absolute div for forgetting that. Blimmin' heck. Yes, we don't get those sort of large gaps in Stanley's production until post The Shining. So there we go. Right. There we go. I'm calling it now. Clockwork Orange was an influence. All right. So what's going on here? I could be completely wrong here, Murgoot. I've only seen this once, and I feel I need to see it again to get closer to understanding it. But our protagonist comes through a garden maze. So that is your symbol that he's kind of lost. He's unsure. He doesn't know what he's doing with himself. You get very unusual jump cuts and in tune with the music. So it'll just move him along really quickly with the cuts, sort of saying it's disturbance, it's feeling out of sequence, it's losing control, things moving faster than he thinks, until he comes suddenly here and he has a bit of clarity. He's out of the maze of confusion and he sees this. So suddenly he thinks he knows what's going on. Everyone is looking forward towards this authority figure, all seated around. Everyone is delighted and happy, but they're getting their hands cut off. A parent takes her daughter up to have her hands cut off, and then she has her hands cut off. So this is some kind of process, some kind of official process that is maiming people, and parents are sending their kids to it. Everyone is participating in it. Everyone's losing out, and he's being welcomed to it, including specifically by this couple here, who earlier in the film we see in a newspaper clipping, who he approved of. And they won a fight to get a documentary questioning the life of Jesus off the TV. So this is basically a Mary Whitehouse stand-in. And unlike many people, I absolutely stan Mary Whitehouse. She's fantastic. I will not elaborate. But in this point, he's now seeing her, who he championed, with doubt.
Mm-hmm.
So what this dream is effectively saying is he's come out of confusion, but the thing that he thought gave him security, so school, the army cadets, Christianity, he's now starting to worry that they are actually stunting him. Like they're leaving him unable to act.
Mm-hmm.
So basically the removal of the hand, I think, is that inability to act, inability to express, certainly inability to play the organ. Although saying which is sort of is how he would connect to Elgar. And if you're wondering if playing the organ maybe has another meaning, Simon is in suggesting this is possibly an anti-Onianism aspect. Well, I mean, Simon, you might actually be on the money there. It's a funny joke about not being able to play the organ, but very possibly, given that we know he's full of sexual shame.
Daniel Hall in Headcanon, Alex is Captain Howdy. That's an obscure reference, and I just watched Dee Snider's Strangeland the other day. It doesn't quite hold up, and yet it does. Very bizarre serial killer film, very squick-worthy, and I applaud your use of obscure horror movies.
Yes. Well, also a reference to maybe a slightly better horror movie, a better known horror movie from 1973, coming out in the Reagan era, you might say. But yeah, kudos. We like an obscure reference. But then, seeing as he's referenced hauntology labels, I think Daniel might actually have us beaten on obscure horror references. What do we say? A man of culture. So yeah, I think this is what the stream is telling us. Basically, at this point, Stephen is really seeing that all the institutions around him are something he can't trust and doubts. And this leads us to a section that is possibly extremely reactionary today. Impressively so, unless you're a Guardian journalist, in which case I mean deplorable and dangerous and shouldn't be on the TV. In fact, ban this sick filth. Do you remember this sequence, Murgoot? This use of sepia imagery. We only get 2 of them in the film.
Yeah, the class picture or the school picture. And I forget what the other sepia tone, the old photograph is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he starts to see his rugby mates in it. So, I was told that I was told that there is quite a strong reactionary traditional streak to this film, and I really see it. I'm just going to note here, Inbred Duck has said there's a channel called Legalized Freedom that does a good analysis of this film. I will check that out. Thank you very much. I haven't looked at it. I don't know the channel, but I definitely want to see someone else's take on this, because I know I've got quite a shallow take on it from one viewing, and I know there's more. So we see this in a long panning shot. Like we have like at least 10 seconds going over this long row of classmates in sepia. So the director isn't doing this for flavor. He really wants you to concentrate on this. And it's in a section where talking about Clockwork Orange too much, where Stephen is discussing with basically a authority figure, I think not a headmaster, but his form head, I guess the teacher who would be with him throughout school, if that makes sense to you, if Americans don't do it that way. Do you have form heads?
Only in homeroom teachers, but that's only elementary school.
Oh, okay. This would be someone who's basically would be like an official, oh gosh, guardian in school, basically watching over him throughout his school career. So close to him, and he is trying to persuade him to conform, to get back into society, to not throw his life away by being a rebel now that he's lost faith. And he directs Stephen's attention to say, like, do you want to be like, or look at these boys, the men of the future, do you want to be like them? These are basically kids who died in the war, who were sent into service.
Mm-hmm.
That's the implication. So he's looking at them and basically thinking, his form teacher is telling him, you should be fed into the meat grinder. And like, this is quite a reactionary take, impressively so, for him to be able to see this and think, hang on, this idea of falling in line is like, ooh, you wanted me machine gunned for nothing. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Later, like, we have a long time to consider this. Like, these are the kids who conformed, and these kids got gunned down.
Yeah.
Now, you might not see that as condemnatory. Stephen certainly does. Stephen sees this as a request to be fed into the meat grinder. Later, he's looking at the lads on the rugby pitch, and there's a certain element of lust about it as well. But those lads playing rugby also get thrown into the sepia shot briefly, which is basically him seeing these guys are conforming, they're going along, they're going to go into the meat grinder too. So he's looking at the school, he's looking at the rugby club, he's looking at the cadets, and then he moves on to looking at Christianity, and basically he's seeing all these institutions have basically been corrupted. His father even helps him understand why. The journalist also, who he had complained about being unnatural, helps him understand why, and basically saying, these have all been taken over. These are all interests, good institutions, good ideas that have been institutionalized and then corrupted.
Yeah. And then when his mother takes him into the city and he just sees everybody conforming, everybody crossing the crosswalk at the same time, everybody going to their shifts.
Yes.
It's in talking about, do you want to be just one of these nameless people? And he's horrified. So.
I just want to go at, so there's a really good comment here that sums it up. So despite the left-wing thank you, Dr. Prepper, saying despite the left-wing aspects of this film's politics, so the journalist is Arne's trade unionism, revolutionary interpretation of Jesus, apologies for race mixing and androgyny, etc. Its notion of what passes for tradition, the modern conformist culture of the mass man, is basically rotten, resonates with me as a right-winger. Well, yeah, that is what is very notable. You're the guy who you would expect to be, what's a phrase I should use on here? Someone promoting all the values you're supposed to have is Arne. And he doesn't seem to do that. As I said, he doesn't tell you we must progress onwards until our airplane crashes. He's actually saying, no, we've got to look away. These institutions have been corrupted. What does Arne do the rest of the time? Okay, he writes plays that are sensationalist and challenging, but he kind of tells you that he was doing it for attention.
Doing it for attention and money.
Yeah. But the rest of the time, what's your man doing? He's gardening. He's taken the carrot pill. He's getting his hands dirty in the soil. He's got to earn his money, but otherwise, what can he do? He's out there working the soil, very honest, very carrot-pilled. And And Stephen doesn't throw himself into some kind of hippie movement. He might find a kind of peace with his sexual desire, but he's very distinct that actually what I do want to do is have belonging. I do want to find a way to have children somehow. And he doesn't go into tearing everything down. He looks to the past. Where Stephen finds his connection, his identity, his certainty is all in the past.
In the Finns, he keeps it's V, not F. It's V, not F on the road sign.
You're too good at this, Murgoot. You're too good at this. Why did I save this screen cap, eh?
He starts when he's wrecked on the bicycle, he sees the sign and it goes from Penvin to Penfen to Pendafen to Pendasfen and then back to Penvin. And he doesn't realize why it's doing that until it's brought up that these were King Penda's lands.
Absolutely. You looked up King Penda and you found out something that makes a heck of a lot of sense for why he's in the title.
Well, it's he was the last pagan king in England. Basically the Midlands, and he fought all comers and for many, many years until he was finally defeated and killed. But the differences in spelling are between the Welsh and the English, and how they kind of the Brythonic versus the Anglo-Saxon spellings, and it confuses the hell out of him.
I mean, there's a lot in it, right? There is a heck of a lot in that. The symbolism is great. You know, the fact that it's a representative of the government here, bless him, who's messing it up. Like this scene might seem like nothing to people. Like, why is some ginger gay gimp going around correcting someone's spelling? This is key, right? And I will tell you in autistic detail.
Go for it.
All right. He sees a road sign, like, okay, you no through road to Pinfin, but the name is wrong, right? It should be Pinvin, quite a memorable name, but the guy has got it wrong. He's not used to the way that would be spelt, so he's just gone and said Pinfin, and it's a simple change, easily done, but it sort of homogenizes, right? It updates and it changes. It makes Pinvin something that's quite weird, more conformist. It is a modernizing, it's an updating, it's a removal of the specifics being done kind of casually, kind of out of ignorance by a representative of the government, right?
Well,
and
it's,
the most
it's kind
people
of backwards. It's going backwards. It's the older spelling.
Well, yeah, exactly. This guy is looking at the representative of the institutions. God, I feel like I'm almost a parody of myself at this point. We'll keep reaching. We've got this representative of the institutions getting it wrong and changing the name. So Stephen then looks at this and it's like, no, it's Pinvin. And then he sees actually, before it was Pinvin, it's older than that. We have history. It wasn't Pinvin, it was Pendafen. And then he goes back even further and realizes there's an even deeper connection there. He's looking for that deep connection, and he realizes that the place is really Penda's Fen. He goes back in the past.
For those who don't know what a fen is, think of a cross between the heather moors and peat bogs, and it's very damp grasslands with lots of peat. If it rains too much, it becomes a bog. Otherwise, it's just damp grassland.
Yeah, it might sound a bit odd, but it is tied to a place. Basically, it is tied to a place. It's very specific. The fact that maybe fen isn't a word we know, like a dell. It's a dell, not just a computer. These are bits of linguistic specificity that get sanded off and homogenized, and they disappear. Yeah. Well, Dr. Prepper, as you say, Stephen is very Tory boy, isn't he? He's correcting it, but then he realizes he can go back further. He doesn't stop at the containment. Stephen is on his way, and I'm afraid this is going to be very in reference for people, so sorry if this is confusing. He doesn't stop at Fresh Prince, right? He doesn't just go back to Fresh Prince. He keeps rewinding, and he realizes there is a far deeper tradition beyond the containment. And that is kind of the message of this film. It's really rooting you to a deep Anglo tradition. And very impressively, I think, understandably, it's making room for what modernity has done to us. So, like Stephen, yes, he's a big old gayer. Many such cases, Murgoot. They're everywhere, I tell you. But he still feels a connection and wants to do his best. He wants to connect. Just like Arn's wife basically says, yeah, she's infertile, but she tries to add positively as well. It's like, she's trying to adopt, but there's actually not enough babies, so she wants to do her bit. So it's making quite a lot of room to connect however they can to their land, to their history. And apologies for taking a while to get to it. TCG sending £2. Thank you very much. Just finished work here, Shekels. Well, thank you very much, and enjoy a well-earned break. Definitely. Very kind of you. I know TCG, after losing the rap battle that we had a few weeks ago, I know that you needed time to recover, and you wanted to sort of try and get back to that experience as a rapper. I know you were off buying about 2 litres of oil. I hope that helps. Sorry. We should have TCG back next week for but very much appreciated, and I hope you're enjoying work. I mean, I've only just taken in that you've just not clocked off, just gone 9:40. Crikey, you are a machine, TCG. My goodness, thank you for dropping in, man. So yeah, that is part of the meaning of this. It's like going back, step over containment, go right back, and that can be kind of a challenging message if you are tied into some of those institutions. If you are, I'm Christian. I attend church myself. It can be a challenging message in this film, but again, Christians, we are not unaccustomed to the church being subverted, and it's expressed in quite an impressive way with some of the visuals here.
Yeah, as he's playing, the music, the floor cracks open, and it goes back to Elgar telling him about the hidden counterpoint, and he's actually playing the hidden counterpoint, and the Christian church cracks apart. It's a revelation, and my thoughts are too disordered to explain how I feel about it. It's a good sign that he's breaking away from his steadfast faith. It's using the hidden counterpoint to the music, expressing it, breaks him out of that mold.
Yeah, I mean the hidden counterpoint. I think Are you reading my notes?
No, I'm just
Okay. No, it's great. We're both on that. That's lovely. Okay, because sometimes I feel a little crazy with these readings. You know, I've been accused of making a reach once in a while. Yeah, we get a long discussion on a hidden counterpoint. I'm not musical at all, so I struggle to explain it. But it would be a sort of tune that works with another tune. And I believe in this. You sort of wonder, why is that there? That's kind of interesting. Why is the ghost of Algar telling him about that? And I think the idea is the hidden counterpoint is about that original deep-rooted culture, deep-rooted pagan culture even. It's the tune under the tune. It's you look at Pinvin and you find out actually it was Penda's Sven, you know, and you might look at things in the church and you might find actually there's something underneath all of that that is more powerful that you need to connect to, and that you don't need the gloss, which I think is what they're getting at. I'm seeing a reference here that I thought was quite interesting. Even Miami Virtue saying this analysis reminds me of, I'm going to mispronounce this, Mircea Eliade's Youth Without Youth, where the attempt to return to ancient names becomes a metaphor for metempsychosis. And apparently Coppola made a good film based on the story. I'm not familiar with it. In fact, and I'll put my hand up, I'm not even sure what metempsychosis is. I would have to look it up, but I'm intrigued. I'm very intrigued by it. So I'm, you know, guys, tone it down a bit. It's awkward to have an audience smarter than I am, all right? Just down a few carlings before the stream, okay? You guys are showing me up with your brains. Yeah, so I guess what I'm getting at is this film has very interesting, very challenging readings, but also quite sensitive ones. How did you feel? Is there an element you'd like to focus on? Because I feel like I got quite passionate about that. I sort of went off on one.
Yeah, no, you expressed my feelings on it completely, much better than I did. Once it gets past this point, once he goes up to Malvern Hill,
oh, there we go.
Seeing you don't have the shot of the puritanical couple coming up to him, and you're such a pure boy, and it's his whole soliloquy about how I'm not pure, I'm mixed races, I'm male and female, and they set him on fire. He turns around and they set on fire and explode. And in the smoke, King Penda appears and gives him the speech about holding to the land and how to become the man he wants to be and what the land needs. And that was interesting. Kind of out of nowhere, but it was interesting.
Yeah, there's a book. Oh, what's her name? Oh gosh, the book's called Among Others, and I can't remember the author's name. Joe Walsh. Joe Walsh has a scene almost exactly like this at the end in the finale. I'm gonna look and confirm. Joe Walton. It's Joe Walton. Yeah, there we go. Joe Walton's Among Others ends almost exactly like this, which is one of the reasons the scene stuck in my head. It's very bold to just, have lightning strike the guy, but we get the, how can I say, we get a very, very uplifting message from this. We sort of find out at the end what the Manichaean recurring theme is, which is about a way to find a harmony in disparate chaotic elements. And it's told explicitly that thanks to a rather lengthy speech from the heretical vicar father of Stephen, that the Manichaeans believed that Jesus was just one of many people who had come representing the light, and other opportunities were coming. And I think it's kind of saying that Stephen, and by implication anyone who enjoys the film and it aligns with it, feels that these are their values. Basically, all of you can be the person who brings things back, who gets things on the right path. Basically, the responsibility is in you to sort of right the wrongs and set things on the correct path again, even if you're a specky ginger gay lad. No excuse. I'm so harsh to him. He's well acted. He's so well acted. Harsh to make it ginger, but yeah.
Well, the first half of the film, Stephen was, as I said before, was so insufferable.
Mm.
And then he starts coming into his own, and I didn't know really what to think about it aside from, man, this kid has a lot going on in his head. A lot more than I did when I was 18.
Yeah. It struck me as, I mean, possibly I'm self-reporting a bit too much here, but it felt quite authentic to me about how teenagers can be. That you can get obsessive, you can like really try and overemphasize something. If you like, you can really lean on something you learn about heavily because it gives you a bit of security, and you can be a bit of an arsehole to people about it. As Stephen is, he's passionate without the wisdom really on, or maybe intelligent without the wisdom, and I think that's a trap that's not exactly unheard of in teenage boys.
Yeah. Yep. Been there, done that.
Yes. And youth work is this endlessly. Spoilers, folks. Spoilers. You love them really, but my goodness, you have to wait out the phases. A question here from Inbred Duck. What was the other race? Yes, because Stephen says he's mixed. Unless I missed it, we don't get that. We don't get the information. I don't think we get a hint. I mean, possibly he's literally just meaning Irish. Like there's some Irish in there, or there's some American.
They mentioned English and Welsh several times throughout the movie. So.
Oh, I missed it then. Yeah, I missed that. Apologies. So that's the real parents were English and Welsh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's me being an absolute div. I missed that. Okay. It seems almost quaint, doesn't it? Can you imagine? Where is he? Let's get him back. Let's get him back. Imagine this lad rocking up asking for a diversity grant. I don't see it happening, Stephen, mate. Not in 2025. Oh, bless. Oh, bless him. Yeah. There we go. There we go. Well, I'm minded that we should probably achieve some form of brevity here. But did you have anything else you wanted to say on the very unusual Penda's Fen?
I was annoyed at the beginning, and then it started making more sense. And there were several red herrings making me think it was going to get more horrifying, but it straightened out into a very decent coming of age tale of a boy becoming a man and realizing everything wasn't quite what he thought it was, and then everything isn't quite what he thought it was, and came across just his waking dreams just become more and more real about it. And it just shows the confusion of adolescence very well.
Yeah, very much so. Were you reminded a bit of, was it called Paper House from the mid-'80s from Bernard Rose?
No, that thought didn't come to mind. I could see that,
Yeah.
but it didn't really come to mind for me.
We'll reiterate, inbred duck, ginger hair is indeed beautiful and awesome. It's an old habit and possibly a little bit of a psyop, internalized psyop that we bully them. No, they're cool. We like them. Christina Hendricks, say no more. Well, I think if you're cool with it, shall we do our closing thoughts and scores? Yeah. Let's go for it.
I would say it's not horror, so I'm going to mark it down. It is very well done. It's a bit strange, a bit bizarre. I'm going to give it 8 out of 12 burgers. It's worth a rewatch just to pick up on the symbology. Not much else going on with it. It isn't cheesy and no well, there's a little bit of pickle, but it's not worth mentioning.
It wasn't the kind of pickle you're after.
Right. Other than that, it's well done. It's very different to what I was expecting.
Possibly because it was advertised as being very spooky. Yeah. So coming away, I think that's fair. I think eight's good. This strikes me as something that could be a climber. That if it gets a rewatch, I could see it climbing up. Maybe not too many, but I think there's very, very interesting stuff going on here. I don't want to sound like I'm copying your homework here, but I probably lean about an 8.5 to a 9 for me. I'm quite warm to it. I've really got a feeling this would go up if I rewatched and was able to dig in a bit more. I'm obviously upvoting it a bit more for some of the messaging, which I think is quite unusual and challenging. It's not pompous, which is impressive. It helps you along with the references. I'm sort of taking some stuff off because I didn't really enjoy the Algar stuff as much. But I can see how it played in. And there were some really interesting moments of dread, like when a baby bird was about to get squashed. I mean, I can't watch anything with animals. Far too effective for me. So I felt when I said this film is filled with dread, I'm thinking of stuff like that. So yeah, I was fascinated. I'll tell you how well it worked is that I popped it on late on Tuesday, thinking that it was just like Lost Hearts. It was just going to be a half hour. And then I saw it was 90 minutes, 100 minutes. I was like, oh gosh, it's 10. I shouldn't be doing this. Watch the whole darn thing. I did not intend to. I thought I'd give it half an hour. No, whole darn thing. So 9 burgers, I think, for me. It's another 9 burger. Very different to Lost Hearts, but extremely interesting.
Miami Virtue on Rudkin.
Yeah, 88. He's 88 at the moment.
There
great,
is an
great
interview
age.
with him that popped up in my feed. I didn't watch it and I didn't save it, but there is an interview with him on Penda's Fin and some of his other works, and I believe the interview is about an hour long. I haven't watched it. I'll have to try and find it, but it is on YouTube.
Yeah, he did return. I know he returned to the horror genre quite interestingly. Let's what did I see him do? Oh yes, he did an analysis of the 1932 Vampire, which I noted. He's written quite a few other plays, so I don't know how deep he went into horror in them. But I get the feeling that he's explored it a few times. Also wanting to note, Patrick Batten, thank you very much for sending £5. Very much appreciated. Saying he's off. Good stream. When are the next horror shorts? They will come in with the next month's theme. Because I noticed you'd linked us to a couple of new ones, so we'll throw those in the mix as well. So yeah, that will be starting in March. We are going to return to horror shorts, and I will try and signal them in advance so people can watch ahead. And have I watched Ben Still's Severance season 1? Is that with BJ Novak? I haven't yet. I think you recommended it, and it was a good. I'd be up for it. I got hooked and blitzed through Shogun and rather enjoyed that. I don't think I will get to watch it before early March. I'm having to rewatch quite a lot of other stuff. There's one director's stuff I'm basically going through again, and a long series of his that I have to finish before I can before early March. So I'm up for trying it after that, and I will get a little note up so I don't forget. So I do fancy that. I know you recommend it, and your recommendations have been good. There we go. I've got it. Excellent. All right. With that, I think we're good. Thank you again, Patrick Batman. Very much appreciated. Folks, as you are still here, I will just do the usual YouTube prompt. If you just leave a like on the video, that would be great. If you can leave a comment, that's even better. It all helps get the word out. And I see a few people being introduced to the streams. That is lovely. Oh, I see it. 10 out of 12 for Dr. Prepper. Thank you very much. Yeah, agreed. I can see it. Thank you very much, folks. I will now close off the stream with your horror homework. Your horror homework for next week. We are still on folk horror, and even after this week where neither of them were folk horror, we're going to continue following the BFI's guide. I've picked a couple of others that were in there, and also someone recommended Robin Redbreast. Now that's also in the BFI list, so we're going to do that. We'll do Robin Redbreast, and we'll also return to M.R. James with A Warning to the Curious. That is also giving us a little bit of that pagan king theme, so that'll be interesting. Simon Roberts will be returning. That crime guy will be returning. It should be a fun stream. And I might try and see if we can review that folk horror documentary that was on Amazon as well. Maybe just a quick take on how well that documentary does in classifying folk horror. Maybe a little bit biased, but I think we did it better. So next week, homework choices, Robin Redbreast from 1970 and A Warning to the Curious, which my notes do not have the name. Oh, what was it? 72. There you go. So we got 1970, 1972. That is your homework. I will get the stream up so you can see it in advance. You should be able to find those very easily on YouTube and some other interesting sites on the old internet. Well, that's everything for me. Murgoot, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and thank you, chat, for being very lively today.
Yeah. Lively. We love a lively chat, and some new people saying hi. Everett, thank you for dropping by. Yes, we're just so you know, we are every Thursday I do videos as well occasionally, but they are very occasional because they're a huge amount of effort, basically. And also, as I'm a film review channel, anything I put out, I have to spend blooming weeks fighting copyright claims. So that's why we tend to do streams rather than videos. So anyway, really enjoyed this one. Have I been dropped off the internet? No, I'm still going. Sorry, something weird happened on my end. Yep, anyway, if my internet's getting weird, I'll bail out quickly. Okay, so homework is out. You've got it. Thank you again, Murgoot. Thank you, chat, and I hope you've got a fantastic Friday ahead of you tomorrow.
Hashtag Shell Gang.
Hashtag Shell Gang, indeed. All right. Thanks, y'all.